Welcome back to this series of videos exploring the Brahms Deutsches Requiem from the perspective of a chorister, myself, an enthusiast, but not a professional musician. My passions might be different from those of a musical scholar, but I hope you will find my musings edifying. The Sacramento Choral Society and Orchestra will be performing the Brahms Deutsches Requiem again this spring, March 23, 2019, at 8 p.m. in the Sacramento Community Center Theater. Having considered the first two movements in these videos already, we'll now turn to the third movement, formerly titled Herr, lehre doch mich, but a movement that, like the second, has a central pivot point or emotional climax that I summarize as the Ich hoffe point. Although history marks 1867 as the year of the first performance of the Requiem, that was actually sort of a preview performance done in Vienna and only included the first three movements. Note that the response to this initial performance was not entirely positive, in part because the scores were still handwritten and the timpanist interpreted a pianissimo as a forte, and the audience complained that the timpani gave it Kopfweh, a headache. Brahms himself first conducted the Requiem 4 months later in Bremen, but this performance only included 6 of the 7 movements we have today. He had finished the beautiful chorale, the How Lovely Are Thy Dwelling Places 4th movement, as well as the climactic 6th and the final Selig movement. And he thought he might have been done here, but as is typical with Brahms, he continued to labor and belabor and tweak and balance the work. It wasn't until slightly more than a year after its first performance in Vienna that the full 7-movement Requiem was finally performed in Leipzig of February 1869. Here, the soprano solo and choral lullaby, 5th movement, was added and became the final addition to the work. Remember, in the 2nd movement, Brahms took 195 measures in a minor key to build up to his high point. Then he had just a mere 9-measure climax at the Aber das Herrnwort point, followed by 130 measures of major key fugal celebration. Similarly now, in the 3rd movement, Brahms introduces the baritone solo, which for 163 measures alternates with the chorus, again in minor key, and again gradually building up to his high point of Sturm und Drang. But this time, instead of a thunderous pivot, he takes things down to a hushed turning point, switching to major key again, but he gives us 9 measures of Ich hoffe auf dich. Finally again followed by 36 measures of an amazing pedal point fugal celebration. I again like how Brahms uses entire verses from his Luther Bible. Here he uses 4 verses from Psalms 39, completely intact from start to finish. But I believe that once again the story gets a bit blurred in translation from Luther German to King James English. For example, take a look at a few points. In the first line we read, Herr, lehre doch mich. In English, this is translated as, Lord, make me to know. Now, that's not entirely bad, but literally, a Lehrer in German is a teacher. So the German here reads, Lord, teach me. A more significant variation is in the next line. The German it reads, Und mein Leben ein Ziel hat, which somehow gets translated in the English version as, to know the measure of my days. Now, Ziel in German is a target or a goal. In this case, when I've asked some German-speaking friends, really what it means here is, my life has a purpose. So Luther is saying here, Lord, teach me that my life has an end, but also, mein Leben ein Ziel hat, that my life has a purpose. Now, down a couple of lines, we find the word shaman. King James Version translate this as passeth away like a shadow. I personally feel that shadow is a bit weak here. Really, it means a shaman means a specter or a phantom, or in a more contemporary terminology, perhaps a ghost. There is a German word for shadow, but that word is Schatten, not shaman. Now, sometimes we refer to as a shadow world as being similar to the spirit world or specters, but it's important to understand that Brahms is speaking here specifically of a spirit or a phantom, not merely a shadow. Lastly, let's make sure we understand the word Trostung, or consolation, because Brahms uses this word in many places in the Requiem, back in the first movement, and later on he'll use it again. King James translate this as, "What do I wait for?" I don't feel that's a good translation at all. Regardless of what the original Hebrew was, we're not in Hebrew school or Bible school. We're studying what Luther wrote and what Brahms used. In German, Trostung is consolation, or perhaps comfort. Luther and Brahms are asking, how can I console myself in light of this fragility and mortality of my flesh that measures a mere handbreit, barely in the width of one hand? So in this first half of the movement, Brahms musically illustrates these verses, gradually builds tension before he hits his dramatic pause. But before we examine the Ich hoffe pivot point, I'd like to consider the second half of the movement. The two halves fit together like matching parts of a puzzle. The second half of the puzzle takes its text from Wisdom 3:1. It's a short single verse, Der gerechten Seelen sind in Gottes Hand und keine Qual rühret sie an. Is this some random selection of verse merely appropriate to fit his musical vision? Actually, no. It's a carefully selected bit of prose that provides thematic answers to the questions proposed in the first half. Remember in the first half how we spoke of the shaman or specter in the first section? Brahms decried how our frail flesh vanishes like a ghost. But in the fugue, he reassures us that die gerechten Seelen sind in Gottes Hand. The righteous souls need not fear becoming phantoms or fading away merely as ghosts. Then remember in the first section, the psalmist complains that our lives are merely ein Handbreit vor dir, a brief handwidth in the grand scheme of time. But in wisdom, we learn that our scant handbreit lives are actually secure in the much larger hands of God. And while the condition of mortal man involves viel vergebliche Unruhe, much vain restlessness, the souls in the hands of God will suffer no torment. Keine Qual rühret sie an. They cannot be touched. So in the third movement, there's a marvelous textual symmetry here between the first half in D minor, which elucidates the woher, or our current condition, mating with the second half in D major, which describes the wohin direction that Luther through Brahms sees in the future state of the soul. Let's turn now to the Ich hoffe pivot point in the middle of the movement. In the previous second movement, Brahms hit us after the pause with the Aber des Herrn Wort double forte high point. This time, he utilizes another technique. He whispers. Recently, this technique has been talked about as if it were some modern invention. During the recent Super Bowl coverage, a commercial company utilized a marketing technique known as ASMR. Do you remember this advertisement? It's an ad for a beer, but besides the beautiful setting in Hawaii and the attractive actress, it was mainly notable because the actress whispered the entire marketing pitch. You kind of had to stop and pay attention to hear the words. This is the method modern marketers called ASMR, which stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. Proponents claim that this technique produces a tingling sensation that begins on the scalp and moves down the back of the neck. And the primary way this effect can be induced is by listening to a softly spoken, or in our case sung, almost whispered voice. Let's watch how Brahms uses ASMR in a performance out of Germany. Brahms backs off of the Sturm und Drang of the first half. He backs way off before he gives us his big, pregnant pause. But then he whispers, Ich hoffe, I hope. He's shooting for ASMR. He wants the music to make the back of our necks tingle. And if we as a choir don't take it way down, almost to a whisper, it won't work. Then, in under 9 measures, he crescendos back to forte before he launches his fugue. Let's briefly look at the notes of the Ich hoffe section. Ich hoffe, ich hoffe. Notice that the choir starts on the C sharp here. Ich hoffe. But musically, Brahms actually starts down on the A with the cello. Cello, ich hoffe. And you know what those 3 notes are? Selig sind. Now look at the start of the fugue. Brahms starts with Der gerechten Seelen. So how does that line start? Der gerechten. And what is that? Selig sind. But now let's get into the fugue itself. It starts loudly and full. Here we go. As Brahms dives into this fugue, notice that he sticks the string bass on a D. They stay on that D without change through the entire 36 measures of the fugue. Musically, this is called pedal point, a term that comes from the pipe organ literature, but here Brahms gives the pedal point to the string bass. This figure signifies unmovable solidarity, security. Ein feste Burg ist unser Gott in Gottes Hand. In the first half of this movement, we saw the frailty of mankind. In the fugue, we are told of security. Keine Qual rühret sie an. No turmoil can touch us or disturb the D in this fugue, or the soul in God's hands. May I suggest a little exercise for you, my choir comrades, to try? Cue up this third movement at home. Play it on your stereo or on your TV, but immediately find a D, any D you are comfortable with, and sing it D throughout the fugue. You can't just hum it or hear it in your brain. You have to sing it out audibly, fully, competing with the stereo. This reminds me of the final battle scene in Star Wars, where Red Leader commanded his fighters to stay on target. Stay on target.
Stay on target. target. We're too close. Stay on target.
You must stay on the D, stay on the D. It won't be easy. Brahms will push you and pull you. He will try to move you away from your D with musical qual, musical turmoil. Don't let it. Stay on your D, because if you succeed, you will be rewarded with a final, resolving, climactic D major triumph. I hope you will give this little exercise a try. Cue up a CD or DVD on the third movement, find a comfortable D, then sing it out loudly and steadily. D, D, just keep singing it. Breathe when you need to, but stay on the D for 36 measures. B, the bass pedal point in this work. It gave me a visceral, physical appreciation for what Brahms is doing in the fugue. Now, I've only tried it as a bass, singing the middle octave D. I'm not sure how it works with alto or soprano D, but give it a try and let me know. In our next video, we will look at the single, most frequently sung movement of the Requiem, the one made popular by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and other English choirs, How Lovely Are Thy Dwelling Places, or Wie lieblich sind deine Wohnungen. These videos are hosted at www.youtube.com/tedhain. I welcome your comments and feedback. Subscribe to the channel to receive notifications of new chapters when they are posted.